Hello and welcome to another Keystone Contractor Association Wellness Chat. Today I'm excited. I'm joined by John Gaal. John, formerly associated with the Carpenters, and now he is Director of Worker Wellness with Missouri AFL-CIO. And John has been working on quite a very important and timely research project, suicide postvention in the construction industry, the first 48. So that's the title. That's John. You want to quickly introduce yourself before we jump right into it?
Sure, sure. Thank you very much for hosting this, John. I really appreciate it. Um, we met face to face finally after many years online a year or so ago at a function in your state capital on opioids in the construction industry, and I tell people all the time this stuff's all tied together. So mental health, suicide awareness, opioid awareness, and so on. Yeah. So as you mentioned, uh, I retired after 40 years in the construction industry with the Carpenters Union. Many of those years with apprenticeship and training and workforce development issues. Um, Oversaw 6 schools in the state of Missouri, 2 in Kansas, 1 in Southern Illinois. So it was a great career. But in the last 20 years of that career, I saw things change, and we actually were approached by Washington University School of Medicine, and they wanted to start studying our apprentices with regards to safety. And when they started, they really started on the obvious stuff that you and I would think about: slips, trips, and falls. What I consider the low hanging fruit. The physical aspects of safety. Those are the obvious things. Well, that was in '04. Well, 3 years later, everybody knows that we had an economic crisis across the globe, and you could see it taking hold of our apprentices in a negative way. So after about a year of seeing that, I went to those researchers and said, hey, I think we need to really step back and also study the mental aspects of safety.
Mhm.
And they said, you know what? We've got partners up at the University of Iowa that do something like that. They call it, they got a name for it. And I said, what's the name? They said, total worker health,
Huh.
which looks at the person, the individual, from 360 degrees, which I said, let's do it. And so that was kind of where we started. Um, and then not too soon afterwards, the opioid crisis hit our industry, and shortly after that, the suicide crisis hit our industry. So, yeah, so that's what we're here to talk about today is suicide postvention. It's the third leg of the triangle. Typically, we see and often hear about suicide prevention programs,
Yep.
as well as suicide intervention programs, but we rarely hear about suicide postvention programs. And so I have to tell you, before we get started here, just
Yep.
out of a duty, of care, uh, we are going to talk about suicide, and therefore I want to give an activation warning. So if people don't want to listen any further, I get it. No harm, no foul. I get it.
Yep.
But if you do listen, please practice self-care. And in spite of what other direction you go, know that if you're in distress, you can reach out to 988. You can call them, you can text them. Those are professional counselors on the other end of those lines, and they're ready and willing to help you out. So I wanted to, put that on the table first.
Thank you.
So
Thanks for that. Yep.
yeah, sure, sure. So what's the why? Why did I do this? Well, there's a couple of things here. The obvious one was about last October, CPWR, which is the research arm of the national building trades,
Yep.
North American building trades unions. They put out a paper that discussed deaths in our industry, in the construction industry. And one of the graphs they show is just so compelling that it needs to be talked about time and time again. And so they in 2023, They looked at the data that was gathered on the construction industry across the United States, union and non-union, from 2022, and it looked at the fatalities of construction workers in that time frame. Believe it or not, John, we lost 991 people to job-related injuries in that calendar year, between the ages of 16 and 64. But that, and I'm not trying to make light of that number because that's huge. You know, it's almost 1,000. That's huge. But on and off the job, we lost 5,200 people out of our industry to suicide.
Wow.
And 17,100 people to drug overdoses.
Oh.
So essentially, just rounding numbers, we lost 5 times as many people to suicide than workplace injuries, fatal injuries, and 17 times more than workplace fatal injuries. So that's really the why.
Yeah.
That's the overarching picture. But from a professional standpoint, being the director of worker wellness, you can imagine, as in your position, you take all sorts of calls, right?
Yep.
I have to tell you, from the end of July last year of 24 to the end of October, so in those 12 weeks, John, I took 8 suicide calls.
Man.
And this became very disturbing to me, that people in the midst of the crisis, the tragedy, had nowhere to turn. Some of those people said, John, because you're experienced, that's why we called you.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, honestly, this obviously is a crisis that more than one person can handle. We got to figure this out. So, as you know, I earned a doctorate many years ago. So I try to write a peer-reviewed journal article related to wellness or whatever every couple of years. And so I thought, boy, this would be a great opportunity to study this issue and hopefully develop some kind of plan. The reason I say that is 15 years or so ago, John, the data showed that when someone died by suicide, they were saying back then it impacted 6 people around them.
Yeah.
More recently, the data shows it actually is closer to 135 people around them.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about close family members, we're talking about close friends, people in the community, coworkers, and so on and so forth. So we've broadened our thoughts on that issue, and that's good because a suicide is going to impact you differently than me, and we may be brothers, and that may have been a mutual friend of ours, but you had personal experiences with that individual different than my personal experiences. So the second reason of the why is from a personal standpoint, and as you well know, in March of 2017, I lost my 24-year-old son to suicide. And so this has been something on my mind since March 24th of 2017. But those 12 weeks, those 8 calls in those 12 weeks last year really kind of put me over the edge saying, hey, enough is enough. It's time to stop listening and start doing, Yeah. And so that's really it put the gears in motion. So what I did was I reached out to a friend of mine who is she's a professor over in London, and she holds a PhD, Dr. Pamela Hatton, and she has her own clinic. And so she has dealt with patients with suicidal ideation. And so I kind of use her as my guiding light, saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? And she would say yay or nay, or maybe push me a little deeper and harder in other directions. And so as a researcher, I had to come up with research questions because you kind of have an idea of what it is you want, but you don't want to poison the well. So in essence, here were my 3 research questions. Number 1 was, should the U.S. construction industry address the aftermath of suicides? Number 2 was, is there a need for a postvention program that focuses on the acute phase? And I'll explain that a little more in depth
Okay.
as we move along here. And the third one is basically, so if you said yes to number two, what might a peer support model, how would that serve the need? And what would it look like? So I started to design this study and realized that uh, as I worked with my mentor, this was nothing that I could really do in a quantitative manner. And so it was really taking me out of my comfort zone. Most of my articles that I've published were quantifiable research articles. So this was moving me into the different phase of research, which is called qualitative. So
Okay.
this was surveys and interviews and focus groups and stuff like that. So this is a mixed method design where I included in phase one surveys and phase two interviews. Phase three, which I'm approaching, is going to be a focus group, and that will be a phase four. So, but the thing is, there's a technique called the Delphi technique, and that is you use what you learned in phase one to kind of steer you on phase two, and from phase two to phase three, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of for those who are researchers out there, that's the path I was taking. So essentially, touching on something we just talked about, I was interested in what people knew about postvention. So I essentially asked the question: how many of you are familiar with the term suicide prevention? And I probably got close to 80% of the people saying they were familiar with that. Um, and then I said, well, are you familiar with the term suicide intervention? And it dropped off a little. It dropped off, into the 70s.
Mhm.
And then I finally said, are you familiar with the term postvention? And it dropped, precipitously. It was down in the 50, 60 range. So, and that's because we've spent a lot of resources in the last 10, 15 years on suicide prevention,
Yep.
um, and some postvention models. So in phase one, uh, what I did was I gathered the research of what I could on prevention, intervention, and mostly on postvention. Read through those documents and realized where I had to head with this. And some of the research models that are out there, John, are the ones that are really kind of high quality, high standards. Believe it or not, are the military. They have a really good program.
I've heard
Um,
that.
Dentists and veterinarians, believe it or not, John.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so when you think about those two, just in a nutshell, because we can't spend the whole program, talking about dentists and veterinarians,
Yeah.
but people might want to know why them. Well, think about what they do every day in their profession. As a dentist, no one says, "Hey, I'm going to the dentist today. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to have my molars drilled on." Right?
Yeah.
So they inflict pain, and when people take on that trauma, that's called vicarious trauma. That becomes part of your psyche, and
Mhm.
it can be detrimental.
I could.
Likewise with veterinarians, especially since COVID. You know, uh, if you've seen the papers recently, more and more young couples aren't having children. But during COVID, a lot of them adopted dogs and
Yep.
cats. Some of those, had to be euthanized. And so when they take them to the vet, once again, they're like their babies.
Yeah,
And
they
so
are.
those vets take on that vicarious trauma. Um, and there's some really good work out there on the K through 12 school system with regards to suicide.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there was a great book that came out by Anna Miller and a colleague, probably just about a year or two ago. Um, Life Under Pressure. It is, if you want to truly kind of grasp what suicide looks like and how it can be contagious in a small community, that book does a really good job. And it does a good job, by the way, with regards to addressing postvention. So most of these programs, John, had something in common. They had
Mhm.
three phases. They had a short term, a medium term, and a long term. You can download these reports. You can Google like dentist post suicide postvention and veterinary suicide, and you'll see they're typically in those three
Okay.
segments. And the short term is typically about 0 to upwards of 3 months. Midterm is like 3 months to a year and a half. Long term is a year or year and a half or more,
Okay.
beyond that period. But those calls I got, John, last year, they
Hmm.
weren't asking me about what do I do 6 months from now. This just happened in my house or on the job site. What do I do right now?
Hmm.
So I'm looking specifically at the short term phase, but at the acute portion. Those first 48 hours is what I call them. And I reached out to subject matter experts, people with lived experience. You'll see the different groups that the research literature told me to reach out to in a few minutes here. But I didn't want to keep it just to the United States because, we don't have the lock on good ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some really good programs over in the UK, both in Australia and in England and Scotland.
Okay.
And so I reached out to Canada as well. Um, and then that got me into the point where I could start designing and developing the survey. And I'd run it past my mentor, and she would yay or nay it, and so on and so forth. We'd discuss it deeper. And eventually I launched a survey. And that survey was launched, excuse me,
Yep.
this survey was launched on November the 15th of 2024. I
Okay.
pretty well closed it on about December the 3rd. So it's open for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Um, at that point, I was targeting construction professionals, first responders. So think about that, first responders. Why did the research literature say that? Well, because of the first one on the site, right? And they
Yep.
see things maybe that the family won't get to see,
Yeah.
and other people won't get to see and understand. So they're talking about firefighters, they're talking about EMS, they're talking about police and coroners.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So you want their input. Um, and then researchers, and practitioners. So the consultants at this stage of phase one were pretty much people who had ancillary duties, related to safety and medical issues, that might be nurse practitioners and people like that.
Okay.
Um, so here's the real kicker. I sent out 64 of those surveys on November the 15th. And on December the 3rd, when I shut it down, I received 64 back.
Awesome. That's amazing.
It was amazing. I I don't know, if it was a sign from above or what, John,
Yeah.
but when I was in my MBA program, taking the marketing class, they basically told me, if you get 15 to 20% from an
Yeah.
online survey, you've hit a home run.
Yeah.
And I'm like, 64 out of 64, goodness gracious.
Wow.
So you kind of extrapolate what that might mean. Maybe they're really interested in the topic. Maybe
Yeah.
they want to say on this topic because they are so interested in it. And so um, basically,
Yeah.
after I closed,
Like you said, they're interested in the topic. When I get a lot of surveys, and if I'm interested, I'll fill it out with the intention of with the goal of seeing the results, knowing like, oh, this looks really good. I really want to see how this plays out. I want to see what happens.
right.
So yes.
So kind of a data snapshot of phase one. The first research question: should the U.S. construction industry address the aftermath of suicides? 95% of the construction industry said that we have an opportunity to act.
Yep.
That was question number 17. There were over 30 questions in that first survey. Research question number 2: is there a need for a postvention program that focuses on the acute phase? 77% said the construction industry needs to focus on the short term. That related to question number 18.
Hmm.
44% said the construction industry must take immediate steps. That was question number 19. Research question number 3 of the survey: might a peer support model serve this need? Nearly 81% of the people identified trained peer support as the most helpful and most immediately following, following the event, whether it was an attempt or whether it was a death.
Hmm.
They felt that it was needed in both cases, and that was question number 23 on the survey.
Okay.
So that was phase one. Now, I'm only giving you the highlights here. So like I said, there was about 30 questions, and that was only 10% of them. But those were the three that directly addressed those research questions. So that led me to phase two. So during the months of January, February, March, and April, I was analyzing the data that I gathered from the survey, and then looked at how can I use that for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So in phase two, I reached out to two subject matter experts, Dr. Luke Steinke and Brian Zorin, who's a benefits specialist. And we jointly designed the interview questions. Again, those were driven by the findings in phase one, reinforcing the Delphi approach. The way we approach this, the first 14 questions were general questions. So everybody, all 15 people answered those first 14 questions. And then there was a section behind that was specific to the 5 groups that I drew into the interview process. So what I realized from phase one going into phase two, that consultants was too general of a category. I needed to break that up. So we ended up with trying to invite three people in each one of these groups. So I invited more than 15 people. 15 people finally agreed.
Okay.
So the first bucket was lost survivors, people who had someone near them die by suicide. The second bucket was attempt survivors.
Okay.
So people who attempted to die by suicide but did not. The third bucket was first responders. The fourth bucket was construction professionals, not unlike yourself, John. Union leaders, many safety directors. Okay. I reached out into both phases, and the fifth bucket was researchers / practitioners. So people who did research on this topic, as well as people who were very active in doing training and things of that nature in this arena. So I sent out emails, basically trying to recruit them, letting them know this is what it's kind of going to look like. We're going to try to shoot for an hour interview. I really would like to record it and then transcribe it. So I needed their permission for that, their consent for that. I sent out self-care information with those emails so that, they had means to, do something beforehand and something afterwards with regards to taking care of themselves. And then, I launched those surveys on May 1, and we closed them up just before the end of May. Okay. We look for common themes, during the analyzing phase. So that was June. I spent most of June analyzing that, and then after I was done, with a higher level version, I sent it out to the two subject matter experts, and they yayed or nayed or said, "Hey, maybe you need to do this or that." And let me tell you this: none of those 15 interview people were part of the 64 from the survey. So these are two separate groups because we wanted differing, hopefully differing viewpoints. So the questions here on this one with the 15 interviewees. So I said, trying to address that first research question, should the U.S. construction industry address the aftermath of suicides? So that went right to one of the general questions, question number 6. So I said, regarding postvention, around 95% of the phase 1 survey participants indicated that the construction industry has an opportunity to act. Would you agree or disagree? Why or why not? 100% said yes, it's time for action. And one of the best quotes I got out of that, and I often share this one, I would say they have more than an opportunity. I would say they have an obligation. So that was really cool. And that kind of set the tone.
Nice.
47% of those interviewees, so almost half, basically said because of the high suicide rate that we have. In fact, the quote I pulled out of that common theme was, they need to make a commitment to act because the rates of suicide within the industry are higher than within other industries. So that pretty well answered the research question number one. So I basically said we need a follow-up to that. So question number 7 was, with respect to the previous question, what is the one action that you feel is most appropriate? So you said we have an opportunity.
Yeah.
What is that action? Nearly 50%, 47% said education, training, and awareness. That was the common theme there. And the quote was, I would say to them, which the them was leadership, consider the inoculation protocol. Be more forward thinking. So this person has this theoretical concept that inoculation precedes awareness.
Yeah.
So we got to get out in front of even suicide awareness programs. And this person's she is a researcher and been in this for quite some time. Question number 9 answered the research question number 2, which was, is there a need for a postvention program that focuses on the acute phase? So here's how question number 9 read in the interviews. How would you describe immediately following a suicide incident, whether it's an attempt or a death? Is that 0 to 24 hours, 25 to 48 hours, or 49 to 72 hours? And nearly 3/4 of the interviewees, exactly 73%, put the emphasis on the 0 to 24-hour time frame. And the quote I pulled out of that common group was, I think touch points need to happen within the first 24 hours. 40% of those people said there is a need for immediate contact. So the quote I pulled out of that themed group was, it needs to be in the first day. I say that because otherwise you leave a vacuum and it gets filled with stories and theories and hypotheses about what has happened that can actually be very dangerous because they're speculating. So immediate action is important because if we leave it to the grapevine, that may set people off and move them towards suicidal ideation.
Okay.
So regarding research question number 3, what might a peer support model, how might that serve this need? That goes back to interview question number 11. So remember, all the people, we're still in the 1 through 14, so all the people are answering this.
Yeah.
So I said, regarding postvention, around 80% of the phase 1 survey participants indicated that peer support would be helpful immediately following a suicide, whether that's an attempt or a death. Would you agree or disagree? Why or why not? Once again, nearly 50%, actually 47% share. That theme was because of shared experience and understanding. And the quote that I pulled out of that theme group was, there's no substitute for someone who gets it and's been there. And a little over a quarter of those same people, 27%, said immediate support, presence is what matters. That was their theme. And the quote I pulled out of that group was, I think if you've got a properly trained peer support program, it can be far more immediate and far more effective than even a mental health professional. I mean, that's huge. And I know this came from a mental health professional. So that has a lot of meaning to me. So that was pretty, that was answering the 3 questions, research questions. But I dug deeper just to try to find out more, because remember, there was 5 groups.
Yep.
Now, the difference between phase 1 and phase 2. So you've learned things in phase one that you don't expect, right? So some of the people, because one of the questions was check a box. Are you a loss survivor? Those kinds of things. And the reason I did that is, John, I wasn't there to guide them. There was no one for them to ask questions to, once they started the survey. And a couple of comments I got back was, I was actually 2 or 3 of those categories. And, my response was, I know, but I wanted you to pick one of them and stay in your mind in that theme through those 30 questions. And so I learned something, so then I used that information in phase 2 and I opened it up. So I said, you can check as many boxes of these 5 as you want. And it was pretty incredible how many people were multiple. I think of the 15 interviewees, John, only 2 of them checked 1 box.
Oh, wow.
Most of them had checked 3 boxes or so.
Okay.
So let me just give you a couple ideas of what those specialty questions look like. So every one of those specialties, loss survivor, attempt survivor, those are so nearly the same. I smashed those 2 together. I sandwiched those 2 together. Okay. But then after that, you had first responders, you had construction pros, and you had researchers, practitioners. So I just picked one out of each area. So question 15 was to the loss survivors and the attempt survivors. And this actually encompassed 12 of the 15 people in the interview. So 80% of the total interviewees said, what do you feel might have assisted you in those first 48 to 72 hours following your related suicide incident, whether it was an attempt or a death? 2/3, 67% said support without judgment.
Yeah.
So the quote I pulled out of that theme group was, it wasn't looking back, it was looking forward. I think that was the most beneficial thing, without a question. So people weren't judging you, right?
Yeah, that's good.
And they were there as a listener. They weren't there as a fixer. John, we're in construction, we're fixers. Immediately our gears, we hear 3 words out of a sentence, we're already thinking about
what can we do? What can I say to that? How can I help?
And that's not what they need. These people need a shoulder, and an ear. So the one question I pulled out of the first responders, that's question number 17. 4 of the 15 of the interviewees were first responders. And so that's about 27% of the total. So the question was, following a suicide incident, how important is it to provide a debriefing opportunity? And why would that be important? And so 100% of them said it's as a theme, it was the emotional and psychological impact of the incident. And the quote I pulled out of that group that stuck out was, because if you don't handle it in the correct way, it'll affect you in the long run. So question number 20, that's the construction professionals. So 5 of them identified of the 15, so that's 1/3 of the group. And they said, I asked them, which organization is best positioned to implement a postvention program in the construction industry and why? 60% of them said labor management associations.
Okay.
So, and 60% said labor, 60% said management.
Okay.
And the quote I pulled 2 quotes out of there. One said, it's labor and management together, to solve this problem. And the other one, I think the agency is doing a really good job, and they're very, very widely respected, listened to, and followed. So those are 2 really good quotes that came out of that theme. So the last bucket, the 5th bucket, were the researchers / practitioners. That was question number 24. 8 of these people identified, 8 of the 15 identified as in this group. So that's over 50%. That's 53% of the total interviewees. And I asked them, how should grief, whether it's simple, complicated, or prolonged, be addressed? 75% of that group said grief is individualized, and it's not a linear process. So that was the theme. Because you often hear people talking about the stages of grief, and when you hear that, you think, okay, 1, 2, 3, and when you talk to the experts, you're jumping all around, even in the same day sometimes. and I could attest to that.
Yep.
So the one quote I pull out of that group, it needs to be acknowledged. Understanding grief is very private and very individualized. Nobody grieves in the same way. That was really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
That, like I said, we did the interviews. I did the interviews in May, analyzed the data in June, and during July, I started thinking about phase 3. So phase 3 is going to be a focus group.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick X number of people out of the survey group and Y number of people out of the interview group and bring them together.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm shooting to start that this month, and hopefully get that done this month so I can analyze the feedback in September. And
but they're interacting together, correct?
Yeah, they're going to be acting together. So the way it'll probably play out, I'm telling them up front. I sent the letters out yesterday, saying, "Hey, it really would like you to participate. I'm bringing people together. It's going to be a small group. It's going to be a focus group. It's going to probably take about 2 hours. The first portion of that time is I'm going to, just like I'm doing with you here, John, share the highlights from the surveys and share the highlights from the interviews. So we're all on a level playing field when we actually get into the meat of the matter, why we're there for the focus group. So essentially, to me, the focus group is we're going to sit there and try to figure out what's our roadmap going forward. What are the end products that we want out of this, right?
Nice. Yeah.
So that kind of takes me off onto a tangent here. And that is, believe it or not, in early June, the first week of June, we were talking a little bit about this before we got on the air. I left the States on June the 1st, arrived in Glasgow, Scotland on the 2nd. On the 2nd and 3rd, I attended an international conference for suicide researchers. It was phenomenal. Met some really good people there. Some people that have actually implemented models in other professionals that I think we can probably rob Peter to pay Paul with, And so, in fact, next Tuesday, I have an interview with the day 2 keynote speaker.
Okay.
She's a veterinarian, and she saw veterinarians, partners around her dying by suicide, and stepped out of the field, went and got her PhD and studied the matter. And she's got a program that is just phenomenal.
That's impressive.
In the past 10 years, John, it's grown 10% a year.
Wow.
So awesome. It's a 24/7, 365 helpline. She's got training, and it's just really cool. So I want to pick her brain before I get too far, down the road. If nothing else, find out what not to do and what to do, that worked for them. Right. So, so that was the second and third. The fourth and fifth, I took a train ride over to about an hour away out of Glasgow, and met with the Canmore Trust. And they have 2 types of postvention training. They have a 4-day for general population, and then they have a 2-day add-on for postvention in the workplace. And so I sat through the 2-day postvention in the workplace, and it was very engaging. Again, pick some of the low-hanging fruit out of that one and try to incorporate in what we're doing. And then I flew down to the Canterbury area and presented my findings to date to several interested parties. It's really cool. They've done some. They've got a group over there called the St. John's Ambulance, and back in March they kicked off a campaign in the construction industry with the yellow high-vis vest, but on the back they put all the weak excuses why guys don't get mental health, go seek mental health, and all these weak excuses on the back, and so they've been spreading that out there to try to break the stigma, So what I'm going to try to attempt in phase 3 is bring these people together and try to come up with a game plan, for phase 4. as a researcher, it's almost a done deal that I'm going to, try to write a peer-reviewed article because
Yep.
why let all this research go to waste. But
Absolutely. Get it out there.
yeah. And so, hopefully maybe, they'll tell me, sometime next year you should have a guidebook, not unlike the veterinarians
Oh,
and the dentists,
that'd be awesome.
uh, and I'm going to reach out to a common friend of ours, Mandy Kime,
Yep.
up in
Up in Washington.
Washington.
Yep.
She's worked with Forefront out of the University of Washington. They put on
That's
some
awesome.
really, really awesome, great 1 hour webinars.
Yep.
And
I've
they
sat
did
through
one
them.
for
Yeah.
the construction industry, and I'm for suicide prevention. I'm going to try to follow up, see if they'd be interested in possibly doing something for suicide
Oh,
postvention.
nice.
So
That would be
yeah,
awesome. That's needed. Yep.
so this is where we're at. Again, to redefine, a lot of people hear suicide prevention and they often think of like AFSP's Talk Saves Lives.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool because just in this past May, AFSP launched a Talk Saves Lives version for the construction industry. That's pretty cool. Um, and then when it comes to intervention, I think more along the lines of QPR, the question,
Yep.
persuade, refer. And I don't know if you know this, John, but a year or so ago, they came out with one specific to the construction industry, and just a few months ago, they just came out with one specific to iron workers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So,
I knew the
so yeah,
construction industry. I didn't know the ironworks.
yep, yep.
Awesome.
So it's pretty good stuff. And right now, as far as construction and suicide postvention, it's interesting because Construction Working Minds just came out with a version
Hmm.
just a month or so ago, and there are other groups that are approaching this. But again, John, they often look at a spectrum of from short term to long term. And I really am focusing because being a father in that position on March the 24th of 2017, I knew nowhere to turn, John. And
Yeah.
and that's a very lonely place. And people shouldn't have to, and it's 2025. We shouldn't do that to people.
Nope.
If they got to face one of the probably worst tragedies I can think of is losing a child,
Yeah.
they shouldn't have to do it alone. And
Yep.
and and it was clear to me in 2024 we still had a lot of people doing it alone.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you before we got on, just 2 weeks ago I was in Las Vegas at the annual Labor Assistance Professionals Conference, and I made this presentation. And I did that on Monday afternoon. And I can tell you every day through Thursday, which was the day I left, I had people coming up to me saying, yeah, this is needed. We need to do
Yep.
something. And
Agreed.
the irony is, right before I left, there was someone out of the lean program in St. Louis who pulled me out of a conference session. Guess what he just took? A call from one of his
Yeah.
contractors,
Jeez.
and he had the safety director on the line, and he said, John, can you help me out?
Hmm.
Give this guy some direction. So it's not going away, John. We got to do something about it.
Yep.
And yeah, so that pretty well wraps it up. So I can see somewhere down the line possibly doing some training.
Yeah.
Once a guidebook's out there, and hopefully maybe a video is out there or something like that online.
Okay.
Um,
We'll bring you back to
so
Pennsylvania.
what's that?
We'll bring you back to Pennsylvania for some
I
training.
would love to. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Senator John Kane for what he
Yes.
did a few weeks ago, right, with the opioid.
Oh, he's been awesome. Yes.
It was with the law he put forth. I mean that
Yep.
was just wonderful, and we need more leadership like that.
Yes.
People are willing to step out of the box and say, hey, this has got to be done.
Yep.
Uh, you know,
If we all do our
so,
small part, we can make a big difference. He's
right,
doing his
right,
small part, you're doing yours. We're all doing our small part.
right,
It adds
right.
up.
So
So
you got any other questions or
I
concerns?
do have a question.
I saw you taking some notes there.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So what was, besides everyone responding to the survey, what was kind of the biggest surprise for you? Anything really jump
Well,
out?
the biggest surprise was getting 100%
Yeah,
participation in the
that's
survey.
what I wrote down. I'm like, wow, that's
I mean,
crazy. I need your
it is
advice.
crazy. And I know researchers out there are going to challenge me on that, but I'll show you.
Yeah,
It was crazy.
yeah. But as
Yeah.
far as
So
quotes or feedback, did anything jump out? Like, oh, I
no,
wasn't expecting that.
the biggest quote to me out of the interview process was, this isn't an opportunity, John. This is an obligation.
Yeah,
Whether it's the union or whether it's management, it's all of ours. It's your fellow worker.
yeah,
Um, I reached out and went back and forth with a number of researchers. Reached out to the mates people in Australia and bounced some stuff off of them, and they actually, one of their people participated in the survey. So I'm very happy with the wide net we cast. Did we always get um, the exact number of diversity? It's pretty rough in an industry that's
yeah,
almost 90% male to begin with anyway,
yeah,
and probably
yeah.
80% of that's white. So, um, but you know what? This is a long journey. This is a first step, and otherwise I could still be thinking about this like I
Sure.
was back, prior to July of 24. Um, and anything else, John?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to hear about phase four, how that plays out, and ultimately, it's going to be awesome to see what the end product is and see what publication comes out or what training is created.
Yep.
That's exciting for me. So this is
Well, as
awesome.
long as I got supporters out there like you, that that
Yeah,
that, that puts fuel in my tank, buddy. It
yeah,
really does. I think we, like you said, we're all doing our small part to
yeah,
address these big issues. And it's really important that we support these kinds of efforts both ways.
yep.
And to me, this isn't a labor issue. It's not a management. It's both,
I
right?
agree. It's
And I
an
think
industry.
you
Yep.
know, honestly, when you talk about industry, we need to include owners,
Yeah.
right? The buyers of construction,
Yep.
right? Because I've always told people, you want something done on the job, put it in the contract documents,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably heard there have been some big jobs where
Oh
the
yeah.
owner said, Mr. GC or Mrs. GC, you will have, and we had a couple of projects not too far from us that were massive sized projects, and those owners told, excuse me, the owners told the GC in the contract documents, you will have a mental health professional on
Yeah.
that job
Yep.
site 3 out of 5 days a week and
Yeah.
at least 6 hours each day and have a private, trailer
Area.
for
Yep.
this. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's really where we were years ago with the drug testing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was getting ready to say
Yep.
that. Yeah, we went drug testing and then we went to worker
OSHA
wellness
10,
with the
all this
morning
stuff.
stretch and everything. And yep.
Yep.
So
Yeah. And,
keep evolving, keep getting
you
better.
look back 15, 20, 25 years ago, we're at where we were with OSHA or drug testing. It just takes a while to get people on board, make them aware that this is an issue, and I think we'll be there in a few years.
Agree. Agree. Well, thank you for your time. This is awesome. And unless you object, I'd like to get your contact info out there and people can
Oh
reach
no,
out.
please do,
Okay.
please do.
Awesome.
And if you need it, I'll send it to you. But
No,
again, I thank you so very much
you bet.
for doing this today. It's an important piece of
It
the
is.
of the research. It really is.
Yeah. Thank you for your efforts, and I look forward to the final product. So keep up the great
Okay.
work.
All
Thanks.
right. Stay in touch. Take care now.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.